Today's video is sponsored by myself and my webshop tsmc.shop. Please go check it out. The new website is now live and we're constantly adding new products to get you a better shopping experience and the best possible tools and materials for your hobby needs. It's the holiday season and I wanted to surprise my uncle with a small die-cast replica of one of the cars he used to have way back when I was a small little boy and he was just as big as he is now, but then a little bit younger. And for that, I'm going to be changing an Oxford die-cast 1/43rd scale Landrover Discovery. That is a sort of silver light blue with the correct stripes in the wrong color, and then changing it to the silver that his car was, and also converting the stripes and or blocks on the side into the correct colors according to the car he used to have back then. So for that, I'm going to be disassembling it all, removing a couple of parts, and also deleting the roof rails as he did not have those on his, and then sanding it all down and also making some templates for all of the striping and logos on the side to copy them later on for me to make it easier to mask it off and have them in the correct positions. After making the templates of all of those livery decals on the side, it was time to remove the roof rails, as those were not on his car back then. I needed to sand down some nibs and bumps on the roof, fill those in a little bit with some filler, and also sand down the rest of the body with a 400 grit to get it ready for some primer. For the repaint, I will be using Mr. Hobby paints exclusively, as these are products that I've recently added to my web shop, the tsmc.shop or the scalemodelingchannel.com. If you're interested, I am selling all of these paints, but I do also thoroughly want to test them myself, as I want to properly know how the paints work and if they are actually a quality product before selling them to you guys. Now in this case, I've used many of these products, primers, paints, etc. on other projects as well, and I'm really loving them. They dry super quickly, have a nice durable finish, and also a ton of colors to offer. So again, if you are interested, I will be leaving a link down in the description to my web shop. Please do check it out, and if you have any questions, just shoot us an email. After applying a couple coats of gray primer, I then moved on to the silver color that I decided upon to go for on this one that matched as close as possible to the picture. Now, the picture is a bit old, so I did go for a bit of a lighter tone, but just a nice fine silver metallic that looked close enough to the picture to replicate it as best as I can. Now, I am fully aware that the primer that I applied earlier looks pretty much identical to the paint that I'm applying here, but I promise you it's silver and not just another coat of gray primer. Also, the picture that I showed you of the car was not the actual car my uncle had, but just one of the press photos from one that looked similar, as he didn't really have any more photos of his car, so it's not the exact one I'm copying, it's just the one that needs to look close. Now back to the livery itself. I made those templates, I cut them out and then positioned them back onto the body where they needed to be, so that I had a nice outline for all of my new masking to go around it. I could then remove the template and spray in the parts that needed to be done. So I started with the lightest color, and that is a pearl white for the top half and smaller sections of the side decals to go first. After spraying a couple of coats, I let that dry and then moved on to adjusting the template a little bit by cutting out the small section that needed to be covered. I did then place that back and traced it out with some more new masking tape to fully cover it up, and then moved on to the darker section, which I chose to do in a metallic black that is more like a gunmetal, but it is close enough to what the car needed to look like. And once a couple of coats of that had been applied, I let that cure again to then move on to the final color, which was a really fine pinstripe of a light blue that went in between the dark metallic and lighter pearl white. with a couple of coats of that now applied as well. Again, a little bit of curing time and then carefully removing all of the masking tape. So the body has now been repainted in the silver. All of the livery has been put on as well. It was time to cover it up with some clear. This time around I decided to go for a clear from Mr. Hobby to finish off all of the products that I wanted to test. I applied it in 3 to 4 light coats until I got a nice smooth glossy finish. Now this is a 1K clear, so it's not as glossy as the 2K clears that I'm usually using, and it's also a little bit softer. But for this kind of project it is really nice. It applies really easily. You don't have to think about mixing it with hardeners and the exact amounts, etc. And also if you need to polish it out, it's a lot softer of a clear, so it's a lot easier to sand and buff back to a nice shine. One thing I do want to mention about these Mr. Hobby paints is that they need to be thinned in order to go through the airbrush. The thinning ratio is not an exact science, but I went with roughly 1:1, so going for 1 milliliters of paint against 1 milliliters of thinner, and that went through the airbrush just fine in my case. You can do a bit less, a bit more, but that's all up to your personal preference, and this is just a rough guide as to what works. As far as thinners go, I'm using the one from Mr. Hobby as well, the thinner in the bigger bottle, number 400. I let the clear dry for about a week before I touched the model again. Now, as expected, the clear coat dries really nice and fast, same as all of the other paints so far, so that's a really big plus point. But with it being a 1K clear, it does dry up a bit flat, a bit orange peely, and not as nice and glossy as you'd like it to be. And maybe if you're used to the 2K clears, it is not the same finish at all. Now, luckily, as I mentioned, it is a lot easier to apply and work with. The downside is that it probably needs to be polished, but that is all up to you and also all up to the finish that you're after. Luckily, the paint is really nice and soft and polishes up really easily with just a small amount of compound, a polishing wheel on your rotary tool, and you're pretty much set to go. It took about 10 to 20 minutes to polish the entire car up to a nice shine. I just sanded it down with some 3000 grit, polished it up with a 2000 compound from Display, and then it was pretty much up to a nice glossy level again. Now, since this is an older Landrover, the paints probably weren't as good as some of the modern cars, which still aren't really that great, so I'm not going for the super glossy finish, just a nice and smooth finish to make it look presentable. So I'm pretty aware that the fingernail on my thumb doesn't really look all that nice. I noticed it a bit too late, so I decided to cover it up anyway. A bit late, but still better late than sorry, I guess. So I'm sorry, but now you know. It's covered up, and I'll try my best in future videos to cover it up again. And if I forget, then I'm sorry, just don't look at it too much. Now, in the meantime, while I was doing that distracting commentary on something you probably didn't want to see, but then decided to look back to what I was exactly talking about, you're welcome. I masked off the body in order to paint all of the window trims, and also did the headliner and some of the interior bits in some black too. And after that was applied, I could start removing all of the masking tape and then get ready to do the final assembly. With the masking now removed, it's time to do the final assembly and just put everything back together. The final small little details have been applied. Some Panelline wash was applied too to make it look a bit cleaner and crisper and also give it a bit more depth. And that's pretty much it for this one. Time to pack it up and gift it to my uncle. I hope you enjoyed this quick little rebuild, and if you like these, do let me know down in the comments below. I still have a couple more in the stash to do for my uncle and also some for myself. So I'm really looking forward to sharing more of this in the future with you guys. Up next, I will probably do some decals on the BMW C4, or maybe move on with the Corvette 1/8 scale from Agora. Please leave a comment down below which one of those you'd like to see first, the Corvette or just doing some decals on the BMW. Thanks for this one, and I'll see you guys next time.